Welcome to episode number 3 of Living Rent Free in My Head. And today you are definitely going to be living rent free in my head because there are some things that I want to talk about. I've been living in the past these days. They say never to live in the past. But, I think that is true for people that, didn't have that great of a past. But my childhood was pretty sick, mostly because I had a great set of parents. My parents did everything for me. They were two of the biggest proponents of me making a YouTube channel. And before even that venture happened, they were big Treeb fans. When I qualified for state for wrestling for the first time, they both slept in their car to watch me go 2-0 at the state wrestling tournament my junior year. All the hotel reservations were booked up, and old Treeb wasn't expected to make it to the state tournament, but I proved all the haters wrong and made it, and did make an impact. I went 2-0. I lost both my matches, but the next year, my claim to fame in wrestling was I was one match away from placing at state. You win some, you lose some. But no, my parents have always been, big supporters of mine, and that's a great example of how they have been very supportive of me. But this privileged background, or this upbringing that I have, makes it hard for me to come up with excuses. When I was a kid, I would try to come up with every excuse in the book, to try and be lazy, despite the fact that I had all the support in the world. But that didn't matter to me because I wanted to play all the video game systems that they got me for Christmas. So that backfired a little bit on them for sure. They did buy us a different game system, I think, pretty much every year for Christmas. All the handheld game systems, all the consoles, we got all of those. But, I think they started to regret it once they kind of figured out that we were going to be subpar learners, my brother and I. And, it is kind of funny to watch your parents kind of slowly give up on you academically. I think that coming out of elementary school, there was some hope, and it was probably like a 5% hope that maybe Treeb can turn it around and be an average academic student. But once seventh grade kind of came, I think my parents were like, just try and graduate. I think my parents cashed out my college fund around seventh grade because it was here where I failed homeroom. My parents came into a parent teacher conference, and I remember my mom sat down, and the teacher who was my homeroom teacher was also my science teacher. And I was failing that class too. But I think really the headline event was that I was failing advisory, is what they called it, but homeroom for you know lack of a better term. And she said it was because I didn't turn in any crosswords or word searches. And it was a homeroom class, and there's 20 minutes in that class, and some of these brainiacs would finish this in like 20 minutes. And it's like, I don't know a 5-letter word for, a bad weather situation. I'm still thinking about it, and we can't pull our phones out because, this teacher has a very aggressive, no phone policy. So, I wasn't acing these crosswords, and I wasn't, finding these words quick enough. I liked the crosswords in elementary school when it was just, up and down and side to side. As soon as they threw in diagonals at me, that's when I tapped out of word searches. Don't put words diagonally. That's not the way God intended. God intended you to read up and down and left and right. Diagonal is just crazy. But anyway, my mom comes in, she hears this, and she's not even really mad at me for not doing the word searches in the crosswords. She was mad because she knows that I know how much she loves doing crosswords and word searches. And she was like, why didn't you just bring these home for me to do? And I would have done them. And, it was that lack of critical thinking skills that I think, have still harmed me to this day. My mom is an awesome lady and is somebody that will, help me out at every turn. But, instead, I had it crinkled up in my backpack along with other miscellaneous papers. I was one of those kids that didn't have things organized by folders. Renee's a perfect example of that. She still has some folders to this day, broken down basically like for work based on like department and hour of day that she needs to get things done. Not me. I'm a scatterbrained motherfucker. Like I have things scattered all over the place, not really neatly put away, and was like that in middle school as well. And they say that that kind of damages you academically, and it's not going to be good for you down the road because it's going to harm your organizational skills and it's going to hurt you and things like that, and they're right. I'm not very organized, and I never have been, and I still can't find diagonal words in word searches. I was really on a line in seventh grade. I don't think I was at like, repeat the seventh grade level, but I was definitely on a summer school level. I just missed out on summer school like every year. Um, and it was really a race to the finish with me and my mom. It was really just a race for me and her to both get me out of summer school. And yeah, we did it. I say we. She ended up doing the crosswords and the word searches, and I turned them in. So shouts out to my mom for being really good at finding words and word searches. And those diagonal words are definitely no joke. I remember in a geometry class when we had to write down shapes and stuff, and I was already really bad at geometry, and a lot of it for geometry for me had to do with me and my inability to draw shapes. I think they'd say, draw this shape, draw this triangle. Get the measurements, tell me what kind of triangle it is. The fact that my triangles would have five sides to them, and they'd say draw an isosceles triangle, and I'm like, man, you're getting a cone and that's as good as you're going to get. Like my art skills really hindered my geometry. um and on top of that, I didn't really do my vocab either. So, really just English and art really hindered my ability to do math. At one point, I had a 19% in geometry. There's no saving me. I was going to have to redo geometry. And, I was doing it as a sophomore and a junior. I was the oldest motherfucker in that class, by far. And that and that sucks. But eventually I did pass, and I learned how to draw an acute, an obtuse, and an isosceles triangle. I was kind of oblivious to my academic failures. I think a lot of it was because I was still playing sports, and I think every high school athlete who I think was in my boat, where you really liked playing sports, uh, and you played a little bit, but you didn't play a whole lot. I think you overestimated your skills or whatever. And, I thought maybe there'd be like a D3 NAIA college that would want my services on the gridiron or perhaps on the wrestling mat. But, I didn't get to thinking, why would just like any random NAIA school want me or know about me, a guy who is just fighting for time at right tackle on the JV team as a sophomore, who also failed biology, geometry, and can't even find diagonal words in a word search. These are things that are holding me back in the realm of becoming a college student athlete. And, I was oblivious to that. And, props to my parents for when I first brought this up for not laughing right in my face. But I do remember it was a conversation at the end of sophomore year when I went up to him and I was just kind of like, what are my options? Where am I going to go to college? And then my dad's like, well, you're going to have to pay for it. And I was like, well, what if, hear me out, I get a scholarship? And my dad said, you don't even bench 165 pounds and you're fighting for time on the JV team. I will let you think about that. And I did think about it, and he was right. So my academic struggles really peaked in middle and high school, but there were signs that I wasn't going to be, an academic machine as early as elementary school. I got pulled out of class to go to a thing called penmanship intermission, which is just an absolutely wild thing to call a event for kids with bad handwriting in elementary school. I would tell my mom I was going to ship mission which made sense to her because she was a special ed teacher and the kids in her class would just play Battleship all day. So she just assumed that I was going to a special ed class and playing Battleship all day. And, by the looks of me, that made sense to her. And I can't, disagree with that. So, I guess that added up. But that wasn't what I was doing. I was getting a workshop in how to correct my penmanship, which was absolutely terrible. When I was a kid, you put a pencil in my hand and I held it like a caveman. I remember specifically one thing that I really struggled to do was write capital N's. A lady that was teaching me how to better my penmanship. I kind of ruined her life. I remember I would write these N's backwards, and she got so mad at me one point that she made me call my mom. And it was only there that she learned that it was penmanship intermission and not ship mission, and she figured out that I wasn't just playing Battleship all day. I was just getting schooled on how bad my handwriting is, and she knew that too. She knew how bad my penmanship is, and to this day, when I write an N, I make sure that I write it the right way. I am a pro at writing N's now. That is something that is in my repertoire. Not as much as looking for diagonal words and word searches, but if you need me to write a capital N, I got you. When I would come back from these handwriting boot camps, on Fridays, there would be these other groups of kids, the special subsection group that would get to leave class at the at the end of the day, and they were called the banana splits group. And I was no academic genius, like we have already established in this video. But what I do know is that penmanship intermission is a lot more intimidating of a name than Banana Splits, and I knew that that was a group that I would definitely prefer to be with. And if anything, Banana Splits sounds more like a special ed group than penmanship intermission. So I was a little confused by that. And I knew it wasn't a special ed group because my homies in the penmanship intermission group were not all going to it, but it was a majority of the class. And, a lot of the kids in the special reading group, that were advanced readers and, the future of this great generation, were also going to this group. And it left me and literally like only four other kids in this classroom. At the end of the week, you'd see the same four kids all throughout elementary school. And then, you just wonder why these other kids, get to get banana splits at the end of the day at the counselor's office. But, nobody asked me why I had to go aside and, you write the alphabet a million times, despite the fact that, I learned the alphabet probably in kindergarten or so. But I showed the same respect that they showed me when I was taking penmanship, workshop. So, I never asked. Around junior year, I got to figure out what the Banana Splits group was. It was for children who come from parents of divorce. And that is hilarious, actually. That is a really funny name for a real serious issue. I don't know why they get to have, such a silly fun name, but mine gets to be really serious. I get penmanship intermission and they get banana splits. I think mine is probably only going to be understood by the teachers and the advanced readers in the class, but still not very fair to get called out every day when I have to go to this. And these kids, they have a mom who's banging the neighbor, or they have a dad who works too much and had to leave, and they get to be banana splits. I don't think that's very fair. So what I did, I decided to jot down a couple of names that would be better for banana splits to make me feel like we're on the same spectrum here as a penmanship intermission. So I have divorce desserts, which is exactly what it is, and I think is the best name possible. Daddy's moving out midday treat, a specialty. Mom's banging the neighbor nice little treat. We already discussed what mom's doing, so we already know. Everyone except the kids with loving parents get banana splits. Really to the point there, and really kind of how I felt. Like it's my fault that my parents love each other and I don't get this dessert. Like just absolutely ludicrous. If you can write your ends the right way, come get your dessert, and if your parents are also divorced. I almost got the rights to that one. Um, but unfortunately my parents are still together, so still no banana splits for me. This stuff really wasn't that long ago. I graduated high school in 2017, which, is 8 years ago, which still, it seems like a long time ago. But in all reality, I'm 26. I'm not that old. And, I want to believe that. But every time that I go on Instagram, and I scroll through some reels, I get one, every couple weeks or so that says you've officially reached Unk status. And it's like SmackDown versus Raw 2007, Jeff Hardy jumping off, the Raw set, and like Adrian Peterson highlights. Now that we got all that fun childhood stuff out of the way, let's hit on a couple of talking points. Mainly today, I want to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars and James Gladstone, who is the new general manager of the Jags. Mr. Gladstone was most recently the director of scouting strategy for the Rams in 2019. He's been there since 2016. Mr. Gladstone is not that well known. He's young and inexperienced in this specific role. He's so much inexperienced that he didn't even have a Wikipedia page when he was first hired. When you look up James Gladstone, this is the first thing that pops up. And, this guy is considered to be the honorable James Gladstone. Now, I bet you he is. He's a guy, a Canadian politician, and I glanced at his Wikipedia page for all of like 2 minutes, and we've already established in this video that I'm not a big penmanship guy. I'm also not a big reader. So, I'm sure if his name is, if he's got the honorable in his name, then he's a pretty stand-up honorable guy. But I do think if James Gladstone is somebody who brings a Super Bowl to Duval County, I think he would be the real honorable James Gladstone. Because you think about what's happened in Duval County is a whole lot of nothing. And, I think, if you think of people in Canada, how many people are you going to name before you get to James Gladstone in Canada? Our James Gladstone here in Jacksonville, he could get a statue if he does really well. But I'm not as excited as a lot of people are, mostly because, you know, he is kind of inexperienced and he is young and we don't know a lot about him. I'm not going to start blindly believing in James Gladstone because I have blindly believed in a lot of people in the Jacksonville Jaguars organization that have blindly broken my heart. Trevor Lawrence has kind of probably been the most recent example. And, I think there's a lot of hope in the Jacksonville building that the new front office, Gladstone and Liam Cohen alike, can bring the best out of Trevor Lawrence. But it's just a recent string that have been kind of similar to other Jags of the past. I mean, Doug Marrone, a guy who the players loved, and I think was a guy that was a likable underdog as a coach. I really liked him. He sucked. Blake Bortles sucked. Everybody that we were told was going to be good, or everything that we thought was going to be great for the Jacksonville Jaguars never ends up being good, but it is a complete 180 from what was in the room before James Gladstone got there. Trent Baalke, the fact that, this guy who doesn't have a Wikipedia page and is, really inexperienced, doesn't have anything really as far as accolades or accomplishments. Just word of mouth from other, NFL people and NFL executives, that is better than Trent Baalke, who had been an NFL GM and, had some, hits in the draft, but, most of them weren't great. That kind of just shows, when NFL minds or NFL execs say a certain thing about a certain candidate, they're usually right. People that have been doing this for a long time and people whose job it is to evaluate talent, people that have been a GM for a long time, people that have been in the NFL world for a long time. They don't just say things to say things, typically in this world. So, when Trent Baalke, who had been blackballed for a long time after his stint with the 49ers, when he was looked at as a bad hire, he was a bad hire. So, it's good that Shad Khan, maybe is looking at his mistakes and is going outside of traditionally what he would do as an owner as far as hiring James Gladstone, because this is a different type of hire. It's not a Shad Khan hire. Um, but yeah, I think I can see why people are excited about it. I'm gonna hold my water. I'm not gonna just jump to conclusions and say, the Jags are back and everything is all grand. I will, come to that conclusion. I will get hyped as soon as we win one game. As soon as we go 1-0, or even if we start the season 0-3 and we go 1-3, um, I will probably turn the ship around and say the Jags are 100% back, because that's just how I am. But I want to see the results on the field first, before I state anything on how good this hiring was, because we really don't know anything about them. I don't see the point, because this could all still blow up in our faces. We don't know. But in the grand scheme of things, who knows? I hope nothing but the best for my favorite team, your favorite team, and your mom's favorite team, the Jacksonville Jaguars. Of course, I always do. But again, gonna hold my water. I do want to now touch on Kill Tony before we get out of here. I did miss out on a chance to talk about Kill Tony in the last episode. I did have it in my show notes, but I forgot to touch on it. So here we go. We're gonna do kind of a little bit of a rapid fire here, touch on Kill Tony, because there is a lot to talk about. And I already feel like I've gone kind of long in this episode. So, we're going to try and keep it a little bit short. So, first of all, I want to talk about day 2 of Madison Square Garden for Kill Tony and the boys. I think that day 2 was better than day 1 as far as the overall show goes and the bucket pulls and just, pure entertainment value. I like the panelists more. I think that day 1 had more star power, but day 2, brought us Joe DeRosa and James McCann. Not as big of names in, not only the world of comedy, but in the world of just pop culture. I think that those two absolutely murdered their spots when they were on Kill Tony, and murdered their spots in Madison Square Garden. I love to see James McCann getting opportunities. We'll touch on his latest episode of Kill Tony here in a little bit. And, he made the best out of a bad situation there. And in Madison Square Garden, I mean, he killed it as a host. And I think he's going to be a guy in the stand up comedy world that if you don't know who he is, I mean, you are going to. He is a very, very funny guy. He has a one bit that's one of my favorites, where he goes over, fool me once, shame on you. And then, he goes on from there. And it's really, really funny. And I suggest you check it out. It's a good, good bit. And I will say that, Tony did this whole, monologue before the show started, basically about how James and Joe were his second option, not his first option to be the host of this show. And before, or no, after he, announces them as the hosts of the show, you hear the Undertaker's legendary gong, and he comes out and has a little back and forth with Tony.
Wrap it up then, or else they bring out the angry. Wait a second. We shock the world with this one.
60 seconds, right? That's all they get?
That's all they get. Or else I'm pretty sure you throw them back to where they came from.
I'm right here.
We
waiting
love
to
it.
go.
First, when I heard that, I thought, oh my God, The Undertaker is going to be a panelist for this episode. But he was not. It was just going to be The Undertaker's gong going off instead of the angry West Hollywood Bear. And I think that was a complete missed opportunity. And it seemed like Tony and Undertaker were kind of having a fun little, back and forth. And it seemed like The Undertaker might have been willing to be a panelist for this episode. And that would have been awesome. And I think Tony would have loved it. I wonder if there was a reason that the Undertaker couldn't be a panelist, or if he didn't want to, or what the situation was. But yeah, no, Undertaker would have been a great panelist for the New Year's Eve show. I don't know if he saw Ric Flair's debacle, and he's like, I don't want to be like Rick, but yeah, it was awesome to see the Undertaker. And they completely underutilized him, because every time that they were about to bring him out, Tony was like, "Oh no, I can't do it to a woman, or I can't do it to this other guy that has like a mental disability or whatever." He didn't bring the Undertaker out for the rest of the night. He's kept saving people from the Undertaker, and it's like, why say you're gonna have the Undertaker come out if he's not gonna come out for the rest of the show?
We're gonna save you from the Undertaker coming out here. Stop. We're not. That would be just so depressing.
What the fuck are you wearing?
All right, no. I'm gonna save you again. I'm saving people tonight.
I don't know. Maybe there's some more backstage stuff going on when it comes to the dead man on Kill Tony on New Year's Eve, but I wanted more Undertaker. I don't know about you guys, but I was a proponent of more dead man walking on the stage for Kill Tony on day 2 of the Madison Square Garden show. Going over one of the guest appearances on the show for the stand-up, Andrew Dice Clay, man. I've never been an Andrew Dice Clay guy. I think I missed that boat. I think I missed that generation. But Tony sure hypes him up a lot, and I know that there are a lot of guys who are big fans of his. And he went out there and bombed in front of the Madison Square Garden crowd. I think he recited a famous bit of his, and the crowd, I just didn't know it, I guess, and kind of ate shit out there. And it was a tough scene to watch. Almost kind of like a funny bomb, though. It was kind of funny to watch, because I think at first he didn't really want to do this bit, but then he did it because I think he thought that more people were going to be behind him, but didn't end up working out like that. Didn't work out in his favor. So poor Andrew Dice Clay. But yeah, it was tough to watch. I actually skipped Cam Patterson's set during this episode, and that's the first time I did that. And it didn't, I don't know if I missed anything. I haven't seen it clipped anywhere, so I guess it's not anything too groundbreaking. We said on the last episode that we're not really feeling Cam Patterson lately. He's kind of been, on a downhill slope for us, and he didn't have a great set day 1 on Madison Square Garden, so I wasn't really too keen on watching his second set. He might have even said the same one. I wouldn't put it past Cam Patterson to do that. So yeah, I wrote that down. I thought that was something of note that I would bring up. Another guy I want to talk about, one of the bucket pulls, Luke Stam. He had a great set and really killed it. And we have a video talking about him. Yeah, I think first appeared on the show, or it was his second bucket pull, and I put him on a list of the best bucket pulls of the month when he was on the show. And he had another great set here on Madison Square Garden. He just ruined his shot, of maybe coming back, because he just had a really bad interview where he talked about like kicking dogs and shit. And then the following Monday's episode of Kill Tony was awesome, because the bucket pulls were on fire. I think just the opening bucket pull was the only one who ended up flopping. Everybody else did very well. Peter Angelo also came back. He was a guy who performed during the Legion of Skanks episode. He's a openly gay man who looks like the biggest Trump supporter, right-leaning man you've ever seen in your entire life. He just does not look like a gay man, but he is. And he had a really good set. He came back to do one, and he performed really well. And the two guests, Adam Ray as Tony Caruso and Jim Norton, two fantastic panelists. Anytime Adam Ray debuts a new character, it's fun to watch. And Jim Norton, I think, is one of the more underrated panelists for Kill Tony. He's one of the best at giving advice to the bucket pulls. And that's one of the things that I think makes for a great guest on Kill Tony, is somebody who offers up advice.
Slow, you're a little tentative. Next time you might want to come out just a little bit more
get to a punchline a little fast. That's all. It's a little quicker if you can.
Asana Ahmad also got pulled out of the bucket, and he had a really good set as well. Wouldn't expect him to get pulled out of the bucket. He's a legitimate stand-up comedian, and he did a great job there. Um, Probably the standout moment of the show was Jake Kennedy, who didn't have a great stand-up set, but he played the violin and he killed it. At the very end of the night, Tony said, "Go hop on your little scooter, come back with your violin, and play at the end of the show." And he did, and he killed it. And Tony offered him a spot on the band at a different date or a later date, and I'm excited to see him come back, and this is a cool opportunity. And one of the things that Tony does well on the show, he gives people opportunities, regular people, talented people that are just coming on the show to do an open mic and get roasted by Tony Hinchcliffe, and you might just walk into an opportunity to show off your talents in other ways. This guy came up, did stand up comedy, brought up the fact that he was a professional violin player, and got to play, and now he's offered a spot on the band, or at least for one night or a couple of times. And that's how your career changes. That's how you get exposure, and it's a cool thing to see, and it's awesome that Tony does that. Frank the Mint was hilarious. He was a former doctor who came out, and he had a hilarious speech impediment, and they made fun of that, a million times. He's a great, funny guy. Jack McWilliams was another good stand-up comedian that was on the show. He had a great bit about a safe phrase instead of a safe word. William Montgomery also came back in this episode, and it was great to see him back on our screens. And this latest episode of Kill Tony was hilarious because it was everything that other episode with Tony Caruso and Jim Norton wasn't. It was a bad episode for bucket pulls. Tony didn't give out a single big joke book until the record for bucket pulls was broken. And, the guy who ends up getting the big joke book at the end of the night is somebody who, again, doesn't really have that great of a set. And it was a hilariously bad episode. And I think my favorite part of this bad episode was when Tony, I think regretfully so, he did not want to do this, but he brought out Drew Nickens in the midst of all this bombing, because his whole thing was, when people bomb, we bring out Drew Nickens, and he brought out Drew Nickens, and I think after he did all these bombs, he's like, well, I gotta do it, and when he did it, oh my God, Drew came out, and it was like, he was one of the bad bucket pulls that just got pulled out. And, it was a lightning round. They didn't even interview him. They just got him out of there and barely got any laughs, just like all the other bucket pulls that bombed. And it was hilarious. Very, very bad stuff. Won't be surprised, if Drew never shows up again, or if it's a long time before we see Mr. Nickens on the show. But again, I think I like these episodes that are really bad, because I think it brings out a different side of Tony. Tony gets agitated, and he has like these funny back and forths with Red Band, and James McCann is a good guest in these scenarios, and he actually had a bit where he was hosting, and it was funny. And I think that every once in a while you got to have these really historically bad episodes of Kill Tony, because when you have episodes like the one with Tony Caruso and Jim Norton, I think it gives some stand-up comedians like a false sense of security to say this is how easy it is. Anybody could kind of come up here and do stand-up comedy, but it really isn't that easy. And you saw that when Tony pulled out 20 something names out of the bucket this last Monday. So very, very different scene on these Kill Tony episodes. But that is going to do it for me, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Living Rent Free in My Head. I really do appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to listen to me ramble about things I'm interested in and just random thoughts that are going in or that are going on in my head. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, click the bell icon to get notified every single time I drop a new podcast. I'm trying to drop these every Wednesday. And I've been pretty consistent about it. So make sure you subscribe. Make sure you drop a like down below. That helps me out a ton. And make sure that you share this with everybody you know. Tell them, hey, Treeb, you remember him from school? You remember the kid from elementary school who couldn't write his ends the right way? Yeah, he has a podcast. He just kind of rambles for about 30 minutes. So go and watch that, and make sure you do that. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.